Hello, mate. How are you?
Good, what's going on?
All good,
How we good here?
mate. Yeah, we're all good, mate. We're on, mate. You're dark. What time is it there?
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Yeah,
Whereabouts are you? Set the scene. Are you in Sydney?
mate, I'm in Sydney, actually in the eastern suburbs, where basically there's a bit of an epicenter of coronavirus at the moment. I think there's been quite a number of positive cases around this area. I think due to maybe the fact that we've got so many like tourists and backpackers, just because we're quite close to Bondi Beach, and so we're in lockdown, we're in isolation, and I'm riding this one out solo, mate.
Are you on your own? Are you? Like, who are you with?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm on my own, and so there's some days where I don't get to speak the spoken word. I go to bed at night realizing that I haven't actually said anything audibly. So it's nice to sit here and engage with you and just have a chat.
Mate, no, it's great to chat to you, mate. It's been a while anyway. I know we've been WhatsApping a little bit, but how are you doing then? Because it must be tough for you. Like, I'm at home here. I've got 4 kids and married with the wife, and we live in the outdoors. We're still finding it tough. You know, I've interviewed a few of the lads on here, and it's kind of using kind of tough terminology or whatever. But you know, it's not tough compared to obviously the doctors and nurses. But being on your own, it must have some of its challenges and stuff. If I see any more of these hit sessions of people in isolation on their own, I'm going to throw my computer through the wall. But what are you doing then? How are you keeping entertained?
Oh yeah, mate. I think it's like anything on social media and stuff. You see the good and you see the times where we're motivated, where we're on top of things with routine. Where we're productive and all that type of thing. But I think the reality of it is that, and certainly my reality is that I do have good days, and I also have some bad days where, often those times where I'm not speaking to anyone, or I'm not able to engage, or just sometimes your motivation's not up and your productivity is not up. There are more difficult times, but and that's just, I think that's just part and parcel of the current situation that we're in. I certainly don't have it as bad as some other people, and my bad days are nothing like people who are going through this virus, who have actually contracted the virus, but also the people that are putting their lives on the line by going on the front line and getting keeping us safe. So, but that being said, yeah, there are times where I get a little bit down. I disengage a little bit. I feel I get a bit quiet on the text, or I don't call and engage as much. But then then there are other days that you wake up and you get stuck into the exercise. You have a bit of a routine and you stick to it. I think the biggest thing for me is having that discipline to kind of engage in it, but then stick to it. You don't do it every day. I don't think it's possible for us to kind of be so military in the sense that we wake up at the same time, do the same thing, stick to it every day. I don't think that's feasible, nor should it be. I think we've got to accept the fact that there are good days and then there are not so good days, and and I think ones where they're not so good make the other ones even better.
Yeah, definitely. And what they're saying out there then, because I know it's different throughout the world, and without trying to go into territory that I haven't got a clue about, and I'm sure that you don't know too much about, but I'm 4 and a bit weeks now. We've been in lockdown. There's talk of it being extended. It hasn't been extended yet. I think Italy and Spain, they're relaxing things slightly. America's fucked because obviously Donald Trump's running the show. Maybe they're not fucked. Who knows? But so what's happening in Australia? What are the messages coming out there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we've got the premiers of each state that are controlling each of their states, but then obviously the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is also trying to control things. Unfortunately, there's probably been a little bit of mixed messaging around what the expectations are for, like, for example, children going to school, whether it's best for them to be going to school or being homeschooled, and also the practicality around that with adults having to work and not having the opportunity or the options to stay at home and homeschool their kids. So there's a little bit of mixed messaging, but as far as there's only really 4 excuses or reasons that you can leave your house, and that's essential travel for work, for medical, for exercise, and I think to see or to go to a funeral and that type of thing. So, and they're pretty hefty fines if you get caught for being out there for any of those reasons that aren't involved in those 4. So, mate, it's just about, like, look, I think, unfortunately, and you hear it on our breakfast TV and you hear it with some of the dialogue on Twitter and everywhere else, everyone's always just trying to find best case scenario, like trying to pick apart the speeches from politicians trying to say, well, what about this or what about I think it just comes down to common sense. Like, this is probably the only time in our generation, especially the only time in our generation, but the only time in our lives where we're going to be forced to stay at home and do nothing. Like, yeah, it doesn't sound. I mean, in practicality, it's not always that eventful, but it's also not that hard to do. If it means that it's going to keep the society safe, and the more we stick to it, the sooner we can start to relax those boundaries and things. Then we just got to have to buy into it, rather than trying to be that person that's glass half empty, trying to find ways and holes in stories and things. I think, look, the simple thing is just stay at home, unless you really need to go out and get food or go to work or whatever. Just stay at home. And then it's up to us to try and find ways to stay occupied and stimulated at home. So, for me, I've got some. I do work out in the backyard each day. I've been getting on the push bike just to get out. And that's sort of my hour of exercise out of sort of my confined space, just to kind of get on the bike and get a bit of fresh air and just feel like I'm actually getting away from home. But I've started doing a bit of painting. I'm not a painter, but it just lets me get off the lounge and stand at the easel for a couple of hours and not watch TV sort of continuously. So I think it's just about finding things to preoccupy yourself and just knowing that it's something bigger than just yourself. And the more that we individually buy into it, the quicker this is going to be behind us.
Mate, of course. Who would be the go-to guys that you speak to as well? I know Matt Gitto's now back. He took the long route round, didn't he? They wouldn't let him leave. Well, I don't know if they wouldn't let him leave, but he came back to Australia quite late. But who will you be your go-tos? Who do you keep in contact there to keep you positive? Because I've got mates and stuff like that, some that I'll ring, and then after I've spoken to them, I feel down as anything. So John Barkley would be one. He's miserable as anything. There's another guy who played for Scotland called Ryan Wilson. He is absolutely loving this lockdown situation in terms of being at home, and I think you just... people are kind of suited to be in these situations. But who would be the go-to that you speak to pick you up?
Yeah, look, I think obviously guys like Matt Gitto, I speak to him pretty regularly. Adam Ashley Cooper, Kurtley Beale. We're often on that house party app just to just to check in and have a chat. And often we'll we'll tune in and have a whiskey, or just make it feel as though we're catching up socially and having a bit of a drink. It feels sometimes it doesn't feel right for me just sitting at home on my own having a drink, but if I'm at least engaging with someone, it feels somewhat socially acceptable. So, but yeah, I think a few of those boys. I've got a good tight bunch of mates from school as well, which we lock in a time on a Saturday and make sure we have at least an hour where we're just sort of having a bit of a yarn and just sort of touching in with each other just to make sure everyone's doing okay. But that's the other thing as well. Like, it's not all like doom and gloom. It's not always just having to check in to make sure people are okay. It's just like just having a yarn, having a laugh, and just doing it because you get along. So I've tried calling you a couple of times. You've brushed me.
It was 3 a.m. So I've had a few of them. I've had a few 3 a.m. calls. I promise you, the next time you ring, I'll answer, get out of bed, and I'll head down to the bar in the garage.
Perfect. Yeah, well, I'll make sure I've got something cold and we can enjoy a bit of a virtual drink together. But I've got a bit of whiskey here. I wasn't sure if it was what time of day for you that we could maybe have a little bit of a toast, but maybe it's not conducive to socially acceptable behaviour at the time that you're sitting in at the moment.
Oh, mate, it's fine, mate. It's fine by me, but it is 9 o'clock, I'll be honest. Let's talk a bit about your ruggers then, because there was a load of stuff out there that you were about to bring out the old slippers and you were heading over to New York, the MLR. We know the season there's finished, but was there any warranted information that you were going to be playing in the MLR, or was it just banter? Were you just putting yourself out there?
No, mate, I'd signed. I was pretty much the few days before we went into proper lockdown here, my visa was approved, which was, it's great that I've now got a visa to go to the United States for 3 years now, but I just can't use it anytime soon until we stop becoming essentially an island state here in Australia. So I'm still going to be going up there to New York.
Really?
Yeah. There we go, mate.
Rennie.
Yeah, that's it, Rennie. So, look, I think I spoke to these guys. I said, basically the week after the Rugby World Cup final last year, I was over in New York and I sat down with James Kennedy, the owner, and Greg, the coach there, and we started chat. Back then in November, and come to an agreement. And It took a little while trying to get the visa sorted, and yeah, but that came through, and then unfortunately, plans just got put on hold. But at the moment, I'm as soon as things are back to what is going to be the new normal, and I'm able to travel up to New York, then I'll be going up there. And I think it's going to be a play it by ear. I'm staying in shape, but I think we've got to be realistic about it, and I'll get in amongst the boys and get training. And if I'm going to have more of a positive impact off the field, then I'll do that. I'll fulfil that role. But if I can still offer something on the field, then I'm definitely keen to put the boots on and get amongst it with the boys.
Oh, well, I was chatting to Foden on here, and I was out in New York, did a documentary out there, a feature on the New York team, and my goodness, mate, you'd be fine on the wing. If you're in the centre, you're not going to play centre, are you?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, they've got the Polynesians in there running Route 1 China, and the ball ain't coming out of there. And poor Foden, he's trying to get into scrum half because he's slower than a week in the jail now. So he's trying to get in scrum half. He was at 13, and this Polynesian lad absolutely barreled him on this. It was like AstroTurf. It wasn't even 4G. It was like AstroTurf pitch.
Yeah, no, it's look. I think I'll hopefully have a bit of time to sort of survey things and hopefully get to pick and choose when I can get involved and when I don't have to, and especially that AstroTurf stuff. If we're training on that, then I probably won't be doing too much contact.
That's where the coaching hat comes on.
Yeah, exactly.
Any of the other lads, King? Because I know obviously Gitz is a good one to chat about. He's done the rounds with clubs, and every club that he's turned up at, he's done phenomenally well. As we know, mate, he's world class. Is he keen to head over to the MLR as well and follow yourself and Nonu and these guys?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think the unfortunate thing for him with, I guess a byproduct of what's going on with the coronavirus around the world is his stint in Japan was cut short. So this was going to be his last season at Sunglath, and unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to kind of play as if it was his last game before retiring, or kind of have that that knowledge kind of going into things that it's you start ticking it off. It's like you go, okay, this is the last time I'm going to be doing this. This is the last time, and you kind of get to it, and then all of a sudden it's the last time you get to play, and you get to, share that with your family and friends. So he hasn't had that. I don't know if he's interested in chasing that in the United States, but I think the thing with Gitz, and the reason why I think he's always so successful in any team he goes to, is his application is world class. Like, he's still super fit. His preparation's always on point, and like you'd think I would have learned a thing or two from him playing alongside him for so long, but there's just some things I don't pick up in terms of his preparation compared to mine. But I wouldn't rule it out. Adam Ashley Cooper was set to go to the Austin Gilgronis. So he and I were training for a number of months going into this season, and we were basically at the same same point in terms of applying for visas and getting all that sort of stuff. And then this happened. So, we're looking forward to getting up there and playing against one another. I'm not too sure. He's also the same age as I am. He's one day younger than I am. So he'll have to, have a think about, whether he wants to go around again next year. He's a little bit more advanced in terms of off the field. He's got a wife. He's got a little boy, Ace, who's 5 months old just yesterday. So, I'm just having to make a decision on my own behalf. So he has to consider two others. So, but yeah, look, I think the thing is, certainly in my experience with the guys here in Australia and at all levels, is that there's definitely an interest in the MLR. There's a number of players over the last few years around the National Rugby Championship level, which is sort of the tier below Super Rugby here in Australia, that have kind of gone up there and they're playing up there already. But now it's starting to get the interest of Super Rugby players, internationals, and I think in the next sort of 2 to 3 years, it's going to be a genuine option for many players across all levels, not just from Australia, but from all rugby walks around the world.
Mate, let's get into the controversial stuff then. Mate, you're on your whiskey. That's your first one. I don't want to say it's a Buffalo because we need to drink responsibly and all that. But let's talk about the other side of things, maybe that aren't that great. Well, they don't look that great from here when you look at Australia Rugby and the whole situation. Doing a little bit of research on it, Raylene Castle, I don't know whether she is on the way out, but there's a good chance she might be. The whole thing around the rights package with Fox Sport that we can maybe get into as well. Just give us a kind of lay of the land, because we've seen the finances. I'm hearing here that Australia Rugby is 2 weeks away from being bankrupt. So as a guy who's on the inside, both emotionally, you played there for years and years, but also in the media and probably have a bit of insight. So how bad is it?
Look, it wasn't great as it was, like a few months ago. I think there's been an element of mismanagement probably over the last decade, to be quite honest, in terms of where our funds have gone and not necessarily putting the right amount of interest and importance into the grassroots pathway and developing future Wallabies as opposed to inspiring. I think that's probably where we've got it wrong, is we've kind of put up probably. And this is just from, again, my point of view. I'm not privy to all the financials and that side of thing, but I would think that we've been too focused on trying to inspire future Wallabies and Wallaroos as opposed to developing them. We don't cast the net anywhere near wide enough to engage with future rugby talent. We only sort of rely really around the GPS, the private schools, to give us our future sort of professional rugby players, both men and women, instead of going to the public schooling out in sort of the regional communities, Indigenous communities, everything like that. So I think we need to put more focus on the grassroots areas. But then I think more recently, because of this COVID stuff, obviously Raylene Castle and everyone at Rugby Australia were involved with TV broadcast rights. And my understanding was that she was almost like a week away from getting the signature for Optus to be the new providers, the broadcasting partners for Rugby Australia, Super Rugby here in Australia, and test matches and stuff. But then COVID happened and things went pretty cold. So she wasn't to know, obviously, about a pandemic about to happen. So that's unfortunate timing that it wasn't able to be secured, because where we sit now is there's no guarantee that, the game here, the finances of the game here in Australia aren't guaranteed for the next 6 months, 12 months, because we don't have a TV broadcasting rights deal. We're currently negotiating also the players having to take pay cuts. That's like happening as we speak now. Pretty robust discussions from what I'm hearing around how much the players are going to have to take. I think the latest I've heard around that is that the top end guys, the Michael Hoopers, Kurtley Beals of the world, will take more of a hit. And percentage-wise, and some of the guys that are on sort of the basic, the base salaries to mid-range might be taking less of a hit, just to, to try and make it as fair as possible. But that being said, Raylene Castle's taken a 65% cut in her pay, which is the largest from any administrator in our sporting landscape, so against Rugby League, AFL, and the CEOs from the other ones. So she's obviously she firstly took 50%, but then 2 weeks later, I think, looking at finances, she felt like 65 was probably where she really needed to end up. So I think it's a difficult one. I know there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of talk around Raylene Castle being moved on, and there's perhaps a bit of a push from, a sector of people who are involved in the game and stakeholders and people who have interest in the game to move her on. I don't think that she needs to be moved on. I don't think it's the right time for it. Whether she's the right person for the job or not is not my decision. But what I think is wrong is the timing of it. Like I said, she's deep in discussions with Optus, Fox, Channel 10, the potential broadcasting partners. She's deep in discussions with the players. To bring someone in now, like to sack her and move her on, and bring someone in now to then have to educate them onto where we are, not only just educate them in terms of where we sit, but also build rapport and relationships with the people that you're having to negotiate. Like, I just think it's, when things are so uncertain, I don't think we need more uncertainty by bringing in someone new. So, it's complex times here in Australian rugby. I think everything, though, when there's a crisis, there's opportunity, and we've just got to hope that the people in the right positions, the people that are making those decisions, can find the opportunity in this. Because, like I said, there's probably been mismanagement for the last decade at least, and maybe this means that we have a proper look at how we're running things in the back office, and we can maybe set it on a more positive path.
Why are they calling for Raylene Castle's head? I don't understand. From the stuff that I've looked at or seen, she got a lot of shit for the Israel-Folau situation, which was an unwinnable situation. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. It was almost an impossible task. Why else are people calling for her then? Like you said, 65% deduction in salary. That there's no one in the UK and Ireland doing that, in Europe doing that at all. I don't think at any level anyone's doing that.
Yeah.
Obviously, people are being furloughed and stuff like that, but I'm talking about in the sports and entertainment world that I'm seeing. 25% seems to be the kind of going rate, and I think some of the CEOs maybe a little bit more in terms of in a rugby sense. But why are they calling for her head? Because it seems from the start that she's been fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, I mean, look, I tend to agree. I think in terms of her tenure as CEO of Rugby Australia, I think she's had a pretty challenging time with two bouts of the Israel Folau saga, I suppose, in terms of two separate occasions where it sort of reared its head. Then there was some, obviously some strained relationships with Michael Cheika throughout the World Cup, and also the introduction of a selection panel with Scott Johnson and Michael O'Connor and Michael Cheika, and there's just some things that I guess were needed to be managed. Then
what's
TV
that?
Right?
What's the selection panel? What's the situation with that?
Essentially, people were in Rugby Australia, well, outside looking in, were unhappy with the fact that Michael Cheika, as the head coach, could pick his own team. I mean, it makes no sense to me that it shouldn't be anything different to that. Because so then they Scott Johnson from who was with Scotland, he became head of the general manager of rugby or something at Rugby Australia, and Michael O'Connor, who was a dual international player from I think the 80s, he came in as a 3-man panel to essentially pick a match day squad. And for me, I just thought, look, Michael Cheika and his coaching staff have had 3.5 years to plan for this World Cup, and 6 months before it, you then introduce two guys that haven't been privy to those preparations. They don't necessarily, they're not up to speed necessarily with how they want to play the game, what body types, what skill sets, all that type of thing in terms of what Michael Cheika and his assistant coaches have in mind to execute a game plan. And then it's essentially a 2 versus 1 at the selection table every time, and you might have to give up a selection to get another one or whatever it might be. But so that came in essentially in the July test matches just before our boys went to the World Cup. So again, it was timing wasn't great. There's probably a little bit of external pressure that we've probably succumbed to in that regard, and and Czech's going up there, and Czech's as you've probably seen from the outside, Czech's a passionate guy, and if and he puts himself in everything that he does, and then when he feels as though that was getting questioned to some degree, then obviously there was some strained relationships there, which have come out since the end of the World Cup, where there was, I guess, one time in Tokyo where it reared its head, and I guess there's harsh words to be said to one another in a public venue. But anyway, so that what I guess.
Oh, come on, you can share that. You can share that. Harsh words.
It's been shared. It's been shared in the press. Michael Cheika and Raylene had a heated exchange at a function, and Morgan Turanui, former Wallaby, had to kind of diffuse the situation and sort of perhaps just suggest that this is probably better done behind closed doors. And,
sober.
Well, I'm not too sure about that, but yeah, I mean, so there was obviously strained relationships, and then going into the TV rights stuff, when we're in a position in Australian rugby where the Super Rugby model, the game, the package that we have just isn't engaging in viewers and in rugby fans. People, for us, like it used to be fantastic at Super 12, and it was kind of used to be our point of difference, which everyone really loved the fact that we had South African and Kiwi teams. But now it's almost like, because we're so spoiled with streaming and live TV, and we don't just have 5 channels on your TV now, you've got almost 500. And the fact that everyone can get what they want when they want it. People just don't engage when the Waratahs or the Reds or the Rebels or Brumbies go to South Africa and they play at 1 to 3 in the morning. People aren't waking up and watching that anymore. And therefore, they don't engage with those teams, the South African teams. They're missing at least a third of their own team's games. And then when those teams come and travel in Australia, there's not that much interest around going and watching the Cats or the Cheetahs or the Lions or whoever it might be, because the fans just aren't engaged with who the players are. And it's so there's something that needs to change in terms of the format of Super Rugby, or at least our domestic footy. Whether I think it needs to be a localised product. I think it needs to be. But this is also, it makes it more difficult because 60% of the TV rights for SANZAR come from South Africa because of the timelines with you guys in the UK and Europe. So I'm just talking, like when you look at it, to engage with our fans, everything needs to be in our primetime TV, which is New Zealand, Australia, engage in the Pacific Islands, and potentially a Japanese side like the Sunwolves. But I think, like we've been listening to dialogue and some of the commentary on socials and in the news about Rugby Australia needing a handout for World Rugby and Tier 1 nations needing handouts. And I think, it's taken something like a pandemic for us to sit here and say, look, we need more money from World Rugby, and yet we've been hearing, or maybe we haven't been hearing, but Samoa, Tonga, Fiji screaming for years about how much they need to be, respected and valued, as entities in this ecosystem of World Rugby, and how we haven't been, given them the what they deserve. And then as soon as things get hard for us, we're all, walking up there with our hands out. I'm like, I think it's a bit rich. I know that we need it in terms of, when I say we, Australian Rugby, need it to survive. But, I mean, those teams that I've just mentioned have been doing it really tough for a number of years. And you always hear about the shared revenue between a Pacific Island nation and, a Tier 1 nation when you play a test match, and how unfair and unjust it is. Like, I think, when you play, I certainly wasn't aware of that, but now it's become a lot more open. I think we need to do something more to help every nation, not just the Tier 1 nations. So, like I said before, I think when there's a crisis, there's always opportunity, and we need to make sure as a game that we seize these opportunities for every partner in this rugby ecosystem, to make sure that it's not just the Tier 1 nations that are thriving and then are keeping the game alive. It's everyone sort of doing something for each other, and maybe it takes something like this to really hear the voices of our partners in the Pacific Islands and everywhere else that need a bit of a helping hand.
Mate, because Augusto Pichot, who's running for the chairman of World Rugby, obviously thrown a cat amongst the pigeons in the last few days. Really, he's been quite active on social media, and he's obviously fighting for the Tier 2 nations, the Pacific Islanders, and trying to globalise the season, which I think would be really good. But I think he's come out just overnight, so your morning maybe today, and he said there's not going to be a bailout for Australia Rugby. So you look at the kind of money or the debt, which, look, rugby's not a money-making sport at the minute. I mean, it might be in certain pockets. I don't know if the All Blacks are. England Rugby were for a while. We know the Hong Kong Sevens, what a place that is. That makes certain parts of revenue as well. But when you look at it, I mean, Australia Rugby, it's on its knees. Is there a way out for them? So a guy that's been in the media, there's talk of Phil Kearns if Raylene moves on. That's a question for you. Why are they going with Phil Kearns? He's a madman, isn't he? Or is that do you think that's not a madman in a good way? Like, he's outspoken, he's a bit of a maverick. Do you think they've gone, or they're potentially talking to him to try and bridge the gap between Fox, a big broadcasting outlet, and Australia Rugby?
I mean, look, that could be, I guess, a way that they're looking at it. But Phil Kearns was in the top 3 for the CEO job when Raylene was awarded the job. So he's been through the process. They know what his, what his ideas are and what his intentions are if he were to get that job. And so I think it was 3 years ago or something when they went through the process. He went through all the way, and it was down to 3. Perhaps even the top 2 is out of Raylene and him at the time. So I think there's perhaps a train of thought that they know what he can offer. He's a really astute businessman. He's on the board, and he's run many different successful companies here in Australia. So, and obviously he's he's someone that's so he's got such a great career behind him in the game. So he loves it. He lives it. So perhaps they want to go down that role, and also his relationship with the Delaney's of the world, the CEOs of Fox Sports, and perhaps to help try and bridge that sort of relationship that there's a little bit strained now between Fox Sports and Rugby Australia as well. So, but again, look, I just don't think the timing's right. I just think that, when there's so much uncertainty, we just can't make it even more uncertain by throwing someone else in. And, I'm sure if Phil was to get the job or someone else, they would do a great job. But I just think that the timing, we just need to, at least for the next 6 months, just sort of have a little bit of certainty in Rugby Australia, because that's what I think everyone's really searching for. It's not just in rugby. I think just in everything that we're doing right now, and in the world in this new world that we live in, is the one thing that we don't have necessarily is certainty in anything. And I think the more you try and chase that, the more anxious you get, the more, like it sort of really starts to play with you. But if you've already got something that's consistent, maybe I think it's best that we just stick with it for, just to ride this one out.
And then lastly, Dave Rennie's coming down and across from Glasgow Warriors. He's been brilliant there. He'll be a massive loss to the Guinness Pro 14. But there's whispers that if Raylene goes, that he might not come in. He might head on to New Zealand because he was sought after there as well. Is there any whispers in that, in them rumours?
I mean, there's definitely, I've definitely heard about it, whether it's just paper talk or if it's genuine. I think we could all appreciate that when you go through, an interviewing for a role like the head coach, a big part of that is the relationship that you can start to build with the CEO and the people that you're going to be working with day to day. And perhaps there was a synergy there between Raylene and Dave Rennie that he thought they were going to be able to go and do some pretty good things. And without Raylene there, maybe he thinks differently. I'm not too sure, but that would be a huge blow to Rugby Australia because it was a bit of a coup getting him here. I guess a few months when they announced the decision, and I think everyone's looking forward to seeing what he can do with the current crop. And obviously things are going to be quite difficult. It's difficult for everyone in world rugby at the moment because I guess access is limited for now. But I think it would be it'd be a pretty big loss to then have to go back through the whole process to see who's on the market again, to see, and rather than kind of just picking someone who's available, like we kind of got someone that we really went after and wanted to get, and I think that's a much better position to be in than just seeing, okay, well, he's left us now, who else is available? I just don't think that's, for us in a position that we're in and the success that we really need. I don't think we should put ourselves in a position where we're chasing just whoever's left to be the head coach of the Wallabies.
Right, let's fast forward 12 months, right? You're stood on the wing in New York, not having to make any tackles, absolutely loving life. And you've got to remember, there's millions of people watching this lockdown show, so we are influencers. Where will Australia Rugby be in 12 months? What's the dream scenario? Like you mentioned, potentially having their own franchise within Australia, include Pacific Islanders, maybe a Japanese team. But as someone that's passionate about it, and has worked in the media, and we are influencers, where are we going to be in 12 months? Where do we want it?
Look, in terms of taking opportunity when crisis presents itself, I think what they're trying to do, or at least what they spoke about doing in the immediate term, was to try and have, I think the New Zealanders are looking at doing a New Zealand conference scenario for the Super Rugby teams and play each other twice. I think there's talk about us doing the same and South Africa doing the same. And in the event, in a few months' time, that restrictions are lower, then maybe the tops of those three conferences and a wild card can play in a final system. But what I would think and what I would hope for is that the engagement into a competition like that, a localised competition, would show that what we need is a localised product. And rather than taking the short-term cash of having the South Africans of the world playing a Super Rugby or a Sanzar Super Rugby model like we know it, play the long-term game a little bit. It's going to hurt us a bit because, like I said, the 60% come from the TV rights from up there. But if we can show that it's engaging in the rugby fans and the public, that a localised product is something that they're really wanting and they start to engage with, then perhaps in 12 months' time, 18 months' time, that's the direction we take, and we just sort of we go it alone with the Kiwis and those teams like I mentioned, and we get a localised product. We stick in our time zone. I think we tried to expand Super Rugby too quickly, and it became to our detriment. We went to 5 teams. We've cut it back to 4. Probably, there's some that would say we even needed it 3 if we're in the same competition. Went to Argentina, went to Japan, like all these little decisions that we made, thinking it was going to, perhaps it was better financially in the short term, but now we're just having people that just don't turn up to games, don't tune into games. So we need to find a way to re-engage with our rugby population here in Australia, and I'm hoping that in this crisis, this COVID-19 crisis, that a localised product sort of spawns and it shows that people really want to engage in it. So in 18 months' time, ideally, you and I are sitting back in New York, having a couple of quiet whiskies in a stadium, and tuning into a localised Australian, New Zealand, Pacific Island, Japanese competition, and or potentially Dave Rennie's called me back because I've got those caps,
Yeah, mate, let's hope so.
I'm completely kidding about that. I'm completely kidding about that.
Mate, and I could be the forwards coach for Australia. Who knows? Drew, thank you very much for joining me on the lockdown. Do you get it? We call it the lockdown because we're locked down.
We're on lockdown.
Yeah, because we're on lockdown. No, thanks very much for that, buddy.
No worries, mate. Good to chat.
And you, buddy. Cheers.